Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing fantastic. So, let's begin. We're reading Niccolo Machiavelli. You know the guy? The famous, the infamous. Now, a lot of people mention him, but haven't taken the time to actually read what he has to say. And let's go ahead and read him, because why not? Chapter 4. Why the kingdom of Darius, conquered by Alexander, did not rebel against Alexander's successors after his death. What a title. What a title. Let's begin. Considering the difficulties there are in holding on to a newly acquired state, someone may wonder how it happened that Alexander the Great became the master of Asia in a few years, and having hardly occupied it, died, from which it would have seemed reasonable for the whole state to have rebelled. Nevertheless, Alexander's successors maintained their hold on it, and had no other difficulty in keeping it than that which arose among themselves from their own ambition. So, very good point. When you get a new territory, the person who originally conquered it dies, there's a vacuum, people want to, fight over it. It's very telling, yes. I would reply that all principalities known throughout history are governed in two different ways. Okay, let's see. So principalities governed in two different ways, either by a prince with all the others as his servants, who by his grace and permission help govern the realm as his ministers. Okay, so the prince has his ministers who serve him, or by a prince and barons who hold the rank not by virtue of the grace of their lord, but by virtue of the antiquity of their family. Aha, so that's where you kind of have the patriarchal feudal system here. So barons versus ministers, see that? So the prince having both of those. So does the prince want barons or ministers, right? Such barons have dominions and they're subjects of their own, who recognize them as their lords and have a natural affection for them. Natural affection. I don't know if you put it that way, Machiavelli, right? You're a serf. I have to get the potato from my lord, and then you're like, if you don't get it, he could just maybe do something to you because you're a serf, right? You're living on that property that belongs technically to the baron, you know what I'm saying? In those states which are governed by a prince and his servants, the prince has more authority, because in the entire country no one is regarded as superior except him. And if they obey another, they do so as his minister and officer, and not feel any particular love for him. So here you go. The barons have their own territory. So the barons are a sort of aristocracy. They can rebel against the king, right? You get all the barons together, they got land, they got property. They can have their own soldiers and knights, hire their own assassins. They can be sought as allies for a potential invading force, right? But at the same time, if you have ministers, they would be spies from within, right? They could, take the letters of the prince and be like, hey, give it to so-and-so. So they could be infiltrated even through their ministers, but the ministers don't have their own armies, whereas the barons, they can kind of muster up more coin to fund mercenaries and such like that. So kind of comes into like who has the most risk factor, right? Examples of these two different kinds of governments in our own times are Turk and the King of France. Yeah, so the Turks and French. The entire Turkish monarchy is governed by one lord. The others are his servants, and dividing his realm into districts. He sends them to various administrators and changes and moves them around at his pleasure. Aha, moving them around. So, not letting them get too comfortable in one spot. A baron, he's more in his spot as his land. His family has been there, for a while. He's a noble, he's an aristocrat. He's an old house, right, with honor. So they could be like, I've been in this land since my great-grandfather, and blah, 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 and this new princess, blah, 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 right? So, it really makes you see how shifting them around, he could have a point. But the King of France is surrounded by a multitude of nobles of long standing who are recognized in that state by their subjects and loved by them. Okay, so they may not be loved, but rather the people are used to them and trust how they will rule, right? So they're serving someone they know instead of a new system, right? A new person whom, like, hey, this person might appoint this person, I don't really like them. You have a noble lord, you might think, hey, he's not going to betray this land because he wants to keep it in his ancestral home. More attachment to the land, therefore the more security and dedication and loyalty to it, right? Safer with someone who will love and defend their land, right? They have their hereditary privileges, exactly, which the king cannot take away except at his peril. Yeah, so if the king starts, overly hating upon those noble families, it can cause problems, right? Encroaching and degrading noble families can be quite problematic for a monarchical figure. Whoever considers these two states, then, will find it difficult to conquer the state of the Turk. But once it is conquered, will find it easy to hold. And so on the contrary. You will find that in some respects it is easier to conquer the state of France, but very difficult to hold it. Now that's interesting because you have the people loyal to the land. They're those barons, right? They're like, you conquered us, but we're not leaving because we were born here, our ancestors have been here, we're not going anywhere. You see? You never know. The causes of the difficulties involved conquering the kingdom of the Turk are that one cannot be invited in by the princes of that realm, nor hope to facilitate the enterprise by means of a rebellion of those the ruler has around him. So, means enterprise, did you catch that? Enterprise by means of rebellion. Causing wedges, right? Dividing, causing strife, rising up factions, not having unity. This happens because of the reasons given above. Because they are all slaves and dependent on their lord. It will be more difficult to corrupt them. And even if they were corrupted, one should not hope that they will be very useful, since they will not be able to bring the people with them, for the reasons given. Therefore, whoever attacks the Turks must realize that he will find them united, and he should base his hopes more on his own strength than on others' lack of unity. Now look at that, that's interesting. So, he's contending the Turks were united. It's going to be hard, but don't place your hopes on their lack of unity, but rather your own strength. This is very, very complex when you begin to think about it, because some have that strategy of deunify, form them into warring factions, make them fight against each other, go in, wrap up the spoils, then side with whoever's left standing and get them through your side, and get into their court, put in a puppet leader, bam, you just taken over, right? So the unity and strength argument is very unique when you apply it to different monarchies throughout history and just different ways governments were set up today. But once they are beaten and routed in battle so that they can no longer regroup their armies, one has nothing else to worry about except the family of the prince. So no longer be able to regroup their armies. They're donezo. Kablam. And once that is extinguished, there is no one left to be feared. Now, nothing else to worry about except the family of the prince. Because if it's a bloodline, the people can still have hope, right? Oh, this king, we love him, he'll be good like his father, he'll be good like his grandfather. So that might re-rally people, see? That's very interesting. Since the others have no credit with the people. And just as the conqueror, before his victory, had nothing to hope for from them, so afterwards he has no need to fear them. Nothing to hope from them and nothing to fear after you've destroyed them. That was brutal. The contrary occurs with realms governed like that of France, because you can enter them with ease by winning over some of the barons in the kingdom. Yes. Since there will always be malcontents and those who desire change. Very good point, right? The king or queen, the couple, they have their barons, right? You need your lords to rally to your cause and help you fight, right? But at the same time, they might be like, we don't like this ruler. Blah, blah, blah. Let's have this country help us. Blah, 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 blah. Whispering in their court, you know? Yeah, and there's going to be those malcontents, you know? And that's kind of who the king has to weed out in his court, you know? It's very interesting. Yes. For the reasons mentioned, these men can open the way to that state for you and facilitate your victory. But this, if you then wish to hold on to your power, leads to countless difficulties both with those who helped you and with those who you suppressed. So it's like, okay, they helped you get in. Now you have to appease them and hope they stay loyal to you, right? They helped you. They want their cut. They want their spoils. Now you have to examine how you're going to keep them from rebelling against you, because you used them to rebel against the previous ruler. You would put in a new ruler. Now you have to go about hoping they don't flip again, right? Flipping and flopping. It's very true. Nor is it sufficient for you to wipe out the family of the prince, because the lords who remain will make themselves the heads of new rebellions. And being unable to either content or to exterminate them, you will lose that state whenever the possibility prevents itself. That's very interesting. So, if you wipe out that family, or if you don't, the barons still are gonna be a potential thorn within your heel. Now, if you consider the nature of the governor of Darius, you will find it similar to the kingdom of the Turk. And therefore, Alexander first had to strike him down and defeat him in battle. After this victory, with Darius dead, the state remains secure in Alexander's possession for the reasons discussed above. So he's comparing the Darius to the Turks here. And successors, if they had been united, might have enjoined it either their leisure, for no tumults arose in the kingdom except those that they themselves provoked. They themselves provoked, look at that. But it is impossible to hold on to states like that of France with such ease. So notice this, you know, the Turks being quite different. They're not, you know, going to be as at risk like the princes he's contending, right? But he said the Turks were more easier to hold on to because of their lack of barons, whereas the French way is more difficult to hold on because of the barons who have a more ancient tie to the land. So he's being very consistent here. Hence, the frequent rebellions of Spain, France, and Greece against the Romans occurred because of the numerous principalities contained in those states. As long as the memory of them lasted, the Romans were always unsure of their hold. But when the memory had been extinguished, they became the secure possessors of those states. Notice this. Did you catch that? The memory is extinguished. So today, when they tear down the statues of the founding fathers, they are bringing in cultural Marxism. They're erasing what the nuclear family means. They're attacking churches. They're, you know, changing the names of schools to be out of the founding fathers because they, you know, want to erase the memory so that you can no longer hold on to that. And then the cultural Marxists will have a more secure possession of the people because they won't have a memory of what it was like before when liberty, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance existed. Instead, it'll be a, you know, separation, balkanization of the population being entirely dependent on a welfare nanny state, the biomedical security state, governed by a social credit score technocracy, right? So he definitely has a point how a memory of the previous thing has to be removed instead of celebrating the legacy. You see the difference here? The barons, they're proud, right? Like, yeah, maybe someone in our patriarchal lineage did something wrong, but we're from this land, you know? Different than switching ministers around to serve a ruler, right? Yeah, there's a lot to think about there in political science terms. Thanks to the power and the duration of the empire, and later when the Romans were fighting among themselves, each one of them could draw a following from those provinces. Yes, exactly. I'm from this part. I'm from Pompeii. I'm from this. I'm from that. Oh, you were actually a Thracian. Oh, blah blah. You know, very good point. I'm from the house of Julii. I'm from this, right? They traced it, depending on the authority he had acquired there. And since the families of their ancient lords were extinct, they recognized no one except the Romans. Having considered all these things, therefore, no one should marvel at the ease with which Alexander held the state of Asia, and at the difficulties that others have had in preserving what they acquired. So he's giving a lot of credit here to Alexander the Great, and how he was able to conquest it. And as he put it, Darius was similar to the Turks, and once Darius was dead, you know, the state remained secure. He defeated him in battle. He struck him down. And it was said, you know, Alexander did have a way of incorporating people into his empire. Like Pyrrhus and many others, this was not caused by the greater or lesser ability, virtue of the conqueror, but by the dissimilarities among the conquered. Look at that. So, the dissimilarities among the conquered instead of the ability of the conqueror. Very unique. And it says here, Alexander died in 323 BC, and his generals took over, and there you go. Very fantastic. Huh. Man. And Darius III, Kodomanos, the last king of Persia, who reigned from 336 to 331 BCE. Bada bing, bada boom. What do you think?